Imagine a world where the blue sky you look up at isn't an atmosphere, but like the literal reflection of a solid ice dome.
Right, yeah.
And where Alexander the Great is a, 20-foot tall immortal currently living somewhere past Antarctica.
It's a completely wild concept.
It really is. And the Spanish conquistadors, they weren't intrepid explorers. They were actually 21-day-old biological clones deployed from European
So it's
laboratories.
fresh out of the factory.
Literally.
Yeah.
Welcome, fellow curious mind, to today's deep dive. If you're familiar with fringe historical theories, you know the premise of questioning the accepted narrative.
Oh, absolutely.
But today we are unpacking an incredibly intricate, highly alternative framework of, well, history, theology, and cosmology derived entirely from a massive stack of writings by an author named Georgy Shapentilevsky.
Yeah, it is a massive undertaking.
And before we jump in, I want to establish the golden rule for this deep dive. We are not here to debate or endorse the political or historical validity of these claims.
Right, definitely not.
We are simply going to impartially explore the staggering scope of this alternate reality, treating the source text as our factual guide for the conversation.
Because our goal today is to really synthesize these sweeping cosmological shifts, these hidden wars and global linguistic resets.
Yeah.
We need to understand exactly how this source envisions the true nature of reality. It's a cohesive, self-contained universe. And to grasp it, we can't just list what happened. We have to look deeply at the mechanics of how it's all supposedly built.
The literal physics of this alternate world.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because in this material, the Earth is flat, the timeline is completely unrecognizable, and the scale of human existence is fundamentally altered.
Precisely. And before we can even touch the timeline of human history, we first have to understand the literal stage it is set on.
Right, the physical boundary is.
Yeah, because the sources describe a planet drastically different from a spinning globe floating in a void.
Let's talk about that geography, because it is mind-bending. According to the text, the Earth spans 5 million kilometers in diameter.
They're just huge.
Massive, and it's entirely covered by a massive electromagnetic dome, but that's just the outer layer. Underneath that EM field, there is a physical ice dome, rising exactly 117.5 kilometers high right in the middle.
Right.
And the sun and the moon, they aren't ancient celestial bodies millions of miles away. The text claims they are local plasma machines.
Just hovering right there.
Yeah, hovering just 40 kilometers above us, and they were introduced relatively recently after the year 1802.
What's fascinating here is the specific mechanical function the text assigns to these bodies.
Yeah.
The moon isn't just a rock caught in our gravity, it's engineered infrastructure.
Wait, like a machine?
Essentially, yeah, it's a massive deep freezer. The text states it operates on principles of vapor compression running at absolute zero.
Oh, wow. So that's minus 273.15 degrees Celsius.
Exactly. And its specific job is to thermodynamically freeze water vapor in the upper atmosphere to maintain the structural integrity of that solid ice dome.
So it's keeping the roof from caving in.
Right. Without the moon acting as a constant thermal sink, the dome would just melt. Meanwhile, the sun acts as a localized heating coil.
Radiating plasma energy.
Yeah, radiating that energy to maintain habitable temperatures down on the ground.
So think of this world like a giant high-tech terrarium or, a cosmic refrigerator. You've got the cooling unit cycling at the top, the heating lamp moving in a precise circuit, and a glass lid keeping the entire pressurized ecosystem contained.
That's a great way to visualize it.
And even the blue sky we look up at, the source is explicit that it's not Rayleigh scattering of light through an atmosphere. It is literally just the optical reflection of the solid blue ice dome above us.
And that completely redefines accepted scientific terms.
Yeah.
Take the concept of a space vacuum, for instance.
Right.
In this worldview, space isn't a boundless, expanding void of nothingness. A vacuum simply refers to the specific area trapped beneath the ice where the water vapor concentration has been mechanically reduced to 20%.
So it's a pressurized and closed system.
Exactly. The illusion of deep space is just the optical distortion caused by looking through that specific concentration of frozen vapor.
Okay, so we have the mechanics of this massive terrarium. But now that we understand the physical boundaries, we really need to understand the calendar.
The timeline, right.
Because the timeline here is severely compressed. If you're familiar with Fomenko's phantom time hypothesis, you know the idea of missing centuries. But Shapentilevsky takes that math and Ringenizes it to an entirely different degree.
He really does.
The text claims that exactly 1,712 non-existing years were artificially injected into our historical calendar.
And the implications of that mathematical shift rewrite literally everything. If you subtract those 1,712 fabricated years, you violently compress the chronology of major historical figures into a very, very narrow window.
It's crazy.
In this timeline, Jesus Christ was born in 1712 AD.
And Alexander the Great was born in 1356 AD.
Yeah,
And this brings us to the original inhabitants of this terrarium, because the text states that the first root race of humans were actually giants,
right.
standing anywhere from 5 to 21 meters tall. And Alexander wasn't just a great Macedonian military tactician. He is described as God's chosen supreme czar of the entire world.
A giant himself.
A giant himself who is still alive today in a region called Alexander's Land, located beyond the ice dome. But wait, I have to push back on this a bit.
Sure.
If history is that compressed, and Jesus and Alexander are basically sharing the same slice of modern history, they aren't walking into an empty world. How do these 20-foot-tall titans interact with the geography and, the regular humans we know?
Well, to understand that dynamic, we have to look at the breaking point of this reality.
Yeah.
According to the text, up until 1054 AD, this earth was a literal undivided paradise. Giants and humanity coexisted peacefully. But then came what our history books call the Great Schism. Only this framework reinterprets the Great Schism not as a split in the Christian church, but as a literal physical rebellion in heaven.
The first Trojan War. But wait, hold on. The Trojan War. I thought we were talking about a biblical rebellion in heaven. How on earth does the siege of Troy fit into a heavenly rebellion?
Right. It sounds contradictory, but in this cosmology, historical mythologies are just fractured retellings of the same cosmic event.
Oh, I see.
In 1054 AD, Satan, who the text claims was originally named Janus, derived from the Proto-Macedonian phrase "Jas sum," meaning I am, rebelled against the Creator.
He uttered that phrase, proclaiming himself equal to God.
Exactly, and sparked a massive cosmic war. That was the true First Trojan War.
And when Satan lost that war in heaven, he was cast down to the 3D Earth, which started a massive Cold War right here on the ground. Because Satan didn't just accept defeat.
No, of course not.
He started bioengineering his own armies. Specifically, he created Draco reptiles, situating them in the Western Zone, which is what we now call Atlantis, or the Americas.
Right.
Meanwhile, the humans and the giants were living in the Eastern Zone, known as Lemuria or Tartaria.
But living on the same landmass as these Draco reptilians quickly became impossible. The text details that these were highly advanced but predatory creatures who literally hunted and consumed humans.
Wow.
The casualty rate was catastrophic. To protect humanity, divine intervention was required on a massive geological scale.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Alexander the Great stepped in. The text says he used something called atom clustering high-tech to build massive dividing walls across the earth in just a matter of months.
In months. That's the key.
And we aren't talking about masonry or brick walls. We are talking about manipulating the vibrational frequency of base matter at the subatomic level.
It's wild.
The text claims this technology literally extruded rock from the Earth's crust to form the 22,000-kilometer Leviathan Wall, which we now know as the Atlantic Ocean floor,
Right.
or the 11,000-kilometer continental divide running down the Americas. Even the Chinese Wall originally stretched all the way to the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
The natural geography we know today, these massive mountain ranges and oceanic ridges, are actually the ruined, degraded remains of these atom-clustered dividing walls.
It is a staggering feat of engineering in the lore. But even with these titanic, subatomically fused walls, the peace couldn't hold.
It never does.
Satan's forces continuously breached the Eastern Zone. The tragedy of the situation is just palpable in the source material. It reached a point where the structural integrity of the terrestrial zones failed entirely.
And God had no choice but to initiate catastrophic resets to physically cleanse the earth of these predators.
Exactly.
Which means we arrive at the floods, not just one, but two massive resets. Because the walls failed, the landscape itself had to be completely liquefied and remade.
Yes. The first was the biblical flood in 1637 AD. According to the text, it lasted 19 years and literally carved out the modern oceans.
But there's a highly specific mechanical detail here, right?
Yes. Before this flood, the earth was covered in 200 giant silicon trees.
Right. And these trees were up to 80 kilometers high. They illuminated the sky like the aurora borealis. Okay, let's unpack this. Silicon trees, like literal computer chip material growing out of the ground.
In a biological sense, yes. The text differentiates between carbon-based life and the massive crystalline silicon-based flora of the Old World.
Okay, that's fascinating.
But during the 1637 flood, these massive crystalline structures had to be destroyed. They were deliberately burned down so that the tracho-reptilians couldn't climb them to escape the rising waters.
And the source material claims there is modern proof of this. It cites that Soviet scientists actually proved the existence of these blind trees by taking deep ocean core samples
Right.
and finding unnatural concentrated levels of carbon dioxide and silicon ash trapped in the oceanic bedrock, tracing it directly back to the burning of these massive flora.
And that cataclysm was followed shortly by the Great Flood of 1802 AD.
So not that long ago at all.
Not at all. It was caused by a 600-meter-high tsunami. This second flood specifically wiped out the remaining chimeras and Babylonian beasts.
Creatures like centaurs and cynocephaly, the dog-headed men.
Exactly, that Satan had deployed in what the text calls the Fourth Trojan War. During both of these cataclysms, humanity and the giants were safely sheltered in highly advanced underground megacities.
Which means the surface of the earth was completely scoured clean. Just a barren landscape of mud and ruined atom-clustered walls.
This raises an important question, though. If the earth was scoured clean as recently as 1802, how did life restart?
Right, where did everything come from?
The source text posits that the entire biosphere was reset. All the flora and fauna we see today, with the exception of maybe a few giant sequoia trees, which are the last remnants of the old carbon forests, are only about 200 years old.
It means everything around us is incredibly new. But this brings up a massive logical gap. If the Earth is basically a blank slate in 1802, covered in mud, and Satan's reptilian armies were largely wiped out, where do the massive global empires of the 1800s come from?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Who is fighting the Napoleonic Wars? Who are the Ottomans? Satan needed a new way to fight the Tartarian giants who were emerging from their underground cities.
And his solution was industrial mass biological manufacturing, cloning.
Oh.
This is how the framework explains the sudden explosive rise of modern historical empires on a freshly flooded planet. The text claims Satan utilized massive cloning factories stationed across Europe.
And how fast are they producing them?
They produced fully grown male soldiers in just 21 days.
So the Roman Empire, the Spanish conquistadors, the Napoleonic forces, the Ottomans, none of them were organic, naturally plant human armies. They were entirely cloned forces. The text even breaks down the etymology, saying Ottoman actually comes from the German Ottoman, meaning man of wealth, because producing this biological army was a massive industrial effort, heavily financed by German Jesuits.
But think about the logistics of this for a second. If you are mass-producing millions of adult clones who have the cognitive capacity of absolute infants when they step out of the incubator, you have a massive communication problem.
Yeah, they don't know anything.
You can't just hand them a rifle, you have to program them.
It's like installing an operating system on a completely blank hard drive rather than, teaching a child to read over years. You have to invent languages that their raw, unformed neural pathways can instantly process.
Exactly the mechanism the text describes. According to this lore, Arabic, Spanish, Portuguese, they were all artificially formulated in 19th century European institutes, specifically as command languages for these cloned armies.
Unbelievable.
Because up until the mid-18th century, the entire organic world spoke a single unified language, Proto-Macedonian.
And the source even points to the Rosetta Stone as mechanical proof of this linguistic reset. It claims the Middle Demotic script on the stone is actually Old Macedonian, the complex language of the human giants.
Right.
But the hieroglyphs at the top, those weren't some mystical ancient Egyptian writing. They were literal picture symbols created specifically for clones with infant-level cognitive abilities who couldn't process phonetic text yet. It was essentially biological programming code.
It is a total recontextualization of archaeology. And it doesn't stop there. The text details how historical artifacts were aggressively manufactured to back up these fake linguistic histories.
Right. The cuneiform claim is wild. The text states that cuneiform was completely faked in the 20th century by the University of Chicago. But wait, how does a single university pull off an archaeological hoax on a global scale? The logistics of that seem impossible.
The source material addresses the logistics directly. It claims the University of Chicago literally had massive industrial kilns running around the clock in Illinois.
Just baking tablets.
Baking hundreds of thousands of clay tablets inscribed with fake cuneiform. They then utilized covert military transports in the chaotic aftermath of World War I to ship these tablets across the ocean.
and physically seed them deep into the Iraqi deserts for later discovery. It was a coordinated industrial-scale planting of false evidence.
And it even claims that a family document found in Macedonia was written in Farsi, using this to argue that Farsi didn't originate in ancient Iran at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it was actually first utilized as a programmed command language by cloned Ottoman forces stationed in Macedonia before the empire expanded and spread that artificial language eastward.
Wow. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this entire cloning logistical nightmare all comes down to a vital distinction the text makes between conscious awareness and electric awareness.
Right, this is crucial.
This is the engine driving the modern world in this framework. Natural humans possess a soul, giving them conscious awareness, the biological and spiritual ability to feel remorse, to deeply reflect, to distinguish right from wrong.
But clones, however, possess only electric awareness. They are flesh machines.
So no soul.
No soul, no internal remorse. They have neurological reactions to stimuli, but that's it. This is how the text explains the absolute ruthlessness and sheer brutality of these historical conquests. These clone armies literally lacked the spiritual hardware required to feel empathy.
But even endless waves of cloned armies eventually wear down. The biological manufacturing takes its toll, which brings us to the turn of the 20th century, specifically the year 1900 AD. The text frames this year as a massive geopolitical and spiritual shift.
Yeah.
The old world order of giants finally stepped back from the front lines.
Correct. In 1900 AD, Alexander the Great and the remaining 5-meter-tall Tartarian giants officially retreated.
Yeah.
The endless wars with the clone armies had ravaged the surface, so they withdrew to Alexander's land beyond the ice dome and deep into those subterranean underground cities.
Leaving the surface behind.
Yes. This strategic retreat initiated what the text refers to as the Little Season, a period granting Satan provisional, temporary control of the surface Earth.
But Alexander didn't just, hand over the keys to the terrarium and walk away. The text claims he left behind a literal, legally binding decree, a contract between God and Satan.
Right.
Forcing Satan's administration to abide by the rule of law rather than the absolute rule of the jungle during this little season. And that document is the United States Constitution.
That's the claim.
According to this framework, that is why the Constitution is so fiercely protected and why it is constantly under attack by those trying to subvert that divine contract.
The modern implications of this 1900 handover define the reality the source claims we live in today. If Satan controls the earth provisionally, the surface population reflects that control.
Naturally.
The text asserts that today, a staggering 80% of the world's population are those soulless biological clones with only electric awareness.
80%.
Yeah. The remaining 20% of organic humans are a new root race, created from scratch after the 1802 flood, with absolutely no organic memory of the pre-flood paradise.
It completely recontextualizes every major event of the last century as a continuation of this hidden war. Like the Tunguska event in 1908. We are told it was a meteor.
Right.
The text claims it was actually a directed energy weapon, a massive DAW attack deployed against a surviving Tartarian stronghold in Siberia.
And modern geopolitical conflicts are just an extension of this.
Yeah.
The text even points out that Russia's highly advanced Iskander missiles are literally named after Alexander Iskander.
Oh, wow.
And claims their vast superiority over Western systems like the American Patriot missiles is due to this ancient, hidden technological lineage preserved from the old Tartarian Empire.
And control over this amnesiac new root race is maintained through a deeply embedded, technologically enforced, simulated reality or matrix. Everything is meticulously managed to keep humanity docile and unaware of its true giant lineage.
The weather, for example.
Right. The weather isn't natural atmospheric variance. It is actively manipulated by HARP technology, pulsing electromagnetic frequencies into the dome to create false localized seasons.
And the subliminal messaging used to control the masses is everywhere. The NATO example in the text is a perfect illustration of how this electrical awareness is manipulated.
Tell me about that.
If you look at the NATO alliance logo, the acronym is visually flipped in French and Spanish to say OTAN. The text argues that while your conscious brain reads an acronym for a political party or a foreign translation, the geometric architecture of the letters interacts directly with the electric awareness of the brain.
So it bypasses your logical thought.
Exactly. Your subconscious mathematically corrects the letters and actually processes it as the word Satan. It's an overarching, omnipresent system of psychological control operating beneath our conscious perception.
It is an incredibly elaborate, closed-loop cosmology. It synthesizes geology, linguistics, theology, and modern geopolitics into one unified, albeit radically terrifying, theory of existence.
Every single anomaly of our modern world is given a hyper-specific mechanical explanation.
So let's just take a breath and recap this staggering journey. We started with a flat Earth, 5 million kilometers wide, enclosed in an EM dome with a localized absolute zero freezer dome made of solid blue ice.
Yep.
We looked at a drastically compressed timeline where 20-foot giants walked the Earth, using subatomic frequency tech to build massive atom-clustered dividing walls that we now call ocean floors and mountain ranges. We explored how 80-kilometer-high silicon trees were burned to the ground before epic floods washed the slate clean.
And then the logistical nightmare of the 19th century.
Exactly. Mass cloning factories, the artificial invention of languages to program them, and the burying of fake cuneiform in the Iraqi desert. All of this culminating in the 1900 handover of the Earth, placing us in a highly controlled, simulated reality where the U.S. Constitution is a literal treaty with Satan.
It's a vast, dizzying tapestry of alternate physics and suppressed history.
It really is. And if diving into this material teaches us anything about the human mind, it's how profoundly the past can be reimagined to explain the complexities, the chaos, and the deep anxieties of our modern world. When the puzzle pieces of reality don't seem to fit, frameworks like Georgy-Shapenchilevsky's offer a universe where every single piece, no matter how bizarre, has a designated slot.
I'd like to leave you with a final thought to ponder, one that builds on the very physics of this source's cosmology that we haven't touched on yet.
Oh.
We discussed the sun and the moon being recent plasma machines introduced after 1802.
But what about the stars?
Oh, right. What are they?
In this framework, the stars aren't distant suns. They are described as phenomena of sonoluminescence. They are literal acoustic vibrations, sound frequencies, trapped and glowing within the water vapor of the firmament.
Oh, wow. Sound glowing as light. Exactly. And the text suggests these acoustic nodes actively react to the ambient frequencies of the masses below. So if 80% of the population only operates on programmed electric awareness, emitting artificial biological frequencies, are the constellations you look up at night just the acoustic echoes of a programmed reality?
That's chilling.
When you wish upon a star, are you just communicating with the hum of the Matrix's own machinery? Are you experiencing the world through a soul or just electric awareness?
So what does this all mean? That's for you to explore next. Thank you for taking the plunge into this massive puzzle box with us. Maybe next time you look at a globe, read a history book, or even stare up at the blue reflection of the sky, you'll remember the cosmic terrarium. Until next time, stay curious.